Well, I want to talk about something important. Something very, very, very important that no one ever really talks about. And I think it is important. And I think I've been more than fair. I think I've been extremely fair to people in white nationalism, Christian identity. I've been more than fair. I've been far more fair than anybody else ever would coming from the outside. I wrote a letter. I didn't actually write a letter. I wrote an email. I wrote an email to Tom Metzger. Everyone knows who Tom Metzger is, right? One of the faces of white nationalism 1.0, one of the leaders and icons. Very well respected by everyone. The purpose of my letter was to ask him to persuade, and I don't know if these two were ever close, but I know that this person was supposedly a local chapter head of WAR, White Aryan Resistance. Tom Metzger's not really a group, because Tom was promoting not having a group, right? Leaderless resistance, kind of like the Louis Beam stuff. Being anonymous, being individual, and doing your own thing. And part of their thing was, if you do illegal stuff, you do commit crimes, you do it by yourself. Now, the crime thing always made me on edge. It bothered me quite a bit. And part of that I'll touch upon in this. But look, everyone knows who listens to the show, everyone knows that I am a conspiracy type guy. My first interest, my first love were conspiracy theories about 9/11, JFK, and Oklahoma City in particular, after I happened to stumble on a few things in the mid-2000s as a teenager, and got my hands on a few books talking about conspiracy-related things. And they posed all these questions that I couldn't answer, and that the official story couldn't answer. And so I thought there was something there, and I still do. But one of those in particular, Oklahoma City bombing, I've read a lot about it. No one else really cares anymore, save for a few people. Scott Horton still cares, and a handful of other people, but, you know, most people you run into, even in white nationalism or whoever, they just don't care anymore. No one cares. It's old news. Doesn't matter. 9/11's the only thing that matters, blah, 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 blah. Like that's really going to go anywhere, right? Please. Anyways. So why did I write to Tom Metzger? Why do you still care about Oklahoma City? Well, it's very simple. The reason is very simple. The reason is that Dennis Mahon was involved in the bombing, and Dennis Mahon, in another parallel universe, would have fried with Tim McVeigh, or been lethally injected, rather, like Timothy McVeigh, and would have been charged with the crime, because he is certainly guilty, along with a handful of other people, of the bombing, of planning, casing buildings, getting materials, perhaps even building the bomb. Thing is, we don't know all the details. We don't know all the details because people who were involved at an intimate level, like Dennis Mahon, who loved the hell out of Andy Strassmeyer, Andy the German, thought he was the greatest thing since sliced bread, looked up to him, and it never has any return calls or return love letters from him after the bombing, and he's so upset about it. Dennis Mahon was there at Elohim City, was there in Oklahoma, was there with Tim McVeigh, Michael Brescia, Richard Guthrie, Peter Langen, who constituted the Aryan Republican Army, the bank robbers. He was there at Elohim City with Andy Strassmeyer. He knew Tim McVeigh. He was there to plan. He lusted after Carol Howe, and then things didn't go well with Carol Howe, and he threatened her and all this dumb shit, and then she went crying to the FBI, crying to the ATF, And then she was used as an informant because Dennis Mahon threatened her after they had an intimate relationship, from what I gather. Anyways, Dennis Mahon is still alive. He's in prison for blowing up some other stupid shit he tried to do, some other deviant criminal activity. I think in 2012. And you know what? I had it out before he died. I had a bitch fest with Harold Covington on social media because he made a post about some link to support Dennis Mahon. And I had pretty much had it at that point. Dennis Mahon is not a hero. He's a criminal. And he has the blood of people in Oklahoma City on his hands, as does the rest of the group who were involved in the bombing with Tim McVeigh. And it wasn't just Tim, and it wasn't just Terry Nichols. It was other people in and around him that I previously mentioned. And it's wrong what they did. It hurt the Patriot movement. It stopped American Revolution 2.0 from taking root. And thus contributes to where we find ourselves today. And there's people out there who deny that, oh, Ted, you're just overreacting. Ted, you're wrong. I looked into it for all of 2 minutes and I decided you're wrong because I don't want to have to confront some unpleasant truths about anything. So you're wrong, Ted. Dennis Mahon had nothing to do with it. Well, I'm calling bullshit on that. I've read enough, I've seen enough to know that where there's smoke, there's fire. And out of all the people still alive who know something and could shed light and give us the juicy, dirty details, and who has nothing else to lose at this point in their life, they're in Dennis Mahon, as far as I understand, is going to spend the next, as of 2012, in and around there sometime, he was going to spend the next 40 years of his life in prison. So what does Dennis Mahon have to lose at this point? He's already spent all his good years doing criminal, deviant behavior like the rest of these guys, the Aryan Republican Army, that didn't work. And it got innocent people killed, and it didn't pan out the way they thought it would with their theory of the revolution being a crime spree away, as I've said in the past. So, because I've dug into all the conspiracy theories about Oklahoma City, I want someone to put pressure on Dennis Mahon to tell the truth. And isn't it funny that his Zog handlers and all these cases and all these prosecutions he's had since then, no one in the mainstream, no one in officialdom wants him to tell these truths. And instead, these people in white nationalism 1.0, they think that, well, criminal, terrorism is the most effective way. And I say no. The most effective weapon we have against Zog now is to smear it, is to show it to be the monster that it truly is. And I believe by Dennis Mahon coming out and spilling all the beans, all the intimate, juicy details about Oklahoma City, the bombing, all the people in and around Tim McVeigh, Andy Strassmeyer, Carol Howe, the Aryan Republican Army, if he would come out and do that and talk about how they were used by the government to kill the Patriot movement, I would have some respect for Dennis Mahon. But I know he'll never do it. They'll just double down on what they did, and they think Tim McVeigh was their revolutionary brother who never ratted on his compatriots and took the secrets to the grave with him, and all this sort of stupid stuff. And I think it's time that Dennis Mahon be a man and tell the truth. Tell the world the truth. A courageous man is not one who goes out and blows up some building like a tard helping out Zog. A courageous man is one who stands and tells the truth, even if it makes him look like a useful idiot. Which this I think, very well might be the case with Dennis Mahon and company at Oklahoma City. And Oklahoma City is just one of those things no one really cares about. Everyone's forgotten about it, and therefore no one tries to connect it to anything today, and no one really cares to know the truth. We just, well, the official story isn't true, and that's, I guess, good enough for me. I guess that's where we close the book and leave it at that. That's the bottom line. Well, most people are content to do that. I think people in and around the story, Carol Howe, I don't know if she's still alive, perhaps. She wasn't that. She was in her 20s when this happened. She's probably mid-40s, early 50s at this point, right? I don't know how to get a hold of her, but I do think Tom Metzger could have some sway with Dennis Mahon and influence this man to come out and spill the beans already. At this point, what would it hurt? At this point, where's the damage? The damage has already been done. And since I'm talking about this subject, let me just be real clear. The prosecution in the criminal trial against Tim McVeigh, the prosecution never produced the security videotapes that the FBI seized, which showed the Ryder truck parking in front of the Murrah building, the driver getting out, and then the whole thing blowing up. And they never produced it. They got rid of it. They never introduced it at the trial, even though it'd be slam dunk prosecution material. They could just present this video, however, a 5-minute video showing Tim McVeigh getting out of the truck, detonating the truck and running away, blowing up the building. Boom, case closed. You don't need a 2-year trial. Boom, jury goes back and deliberates for 5 minutes, and it's a unanimous conviction. They could have done that, but they didn't, folks. They didn't. You know why they did not produce that videotape? You know why they made it disappear? Because it showed 2 people in the truck. Might not even, in the 2 people, we'll call them John Doe 1 and John Doe 2, might not have even been McVeigh. It could have been some other person driving. And if the witnesses are to be believed about what they saw, a handful of reporters and people saw these videos before the FBI confiscated them, and they went on to write articles about what they saw, describing what they saw. And a couple of the journalists described a scene where 2 men were in the truck, not just Tim McVeigh by himself, 2 men were in the truck, and that John Doe 2, the passenger, gets out of the truck, goes around to the back of the truck, lights the fuse, they think, and then is seen running away. So all this stuff about how it's so bulletproof, Tim did it, and Tim's only responsible, I have no doubt, folks, that Tim is guilty by association of planning this thing, orchestrating it, casing the building. And since he went down and was executed, that means other people involved should be too, right? That's legally consistent, and I think it's morally consistent too. What happened with the Oklahoma City bombing is that a bunch of retards, claiming to be white nationalist revolutionaries, were used by the Jews to be blamed for this tragedy in which they killed 168 people, children included. And then that was blamed on the militia patriot movement to make ordinary white people disavow it, run away from it, and not take any action politically in their local communities. And all the while, these stupid white nationalist types like Dennis Mahon thought they were going to spark a civil war by doing it. Like this was, the attack on Fort Sumter all over again, and that, half the country, half the governors, half the state legislatures would then suddenly be roused to declare independence and start a war against the government. Something like that. That's what they thought. And that's what Tim McVeigh was provocatored to do, to carry out a crime. And it's pretty clear to me he was working for Black Ops. He wrote that much in a letter to his sister. Many people in and around the case, the investigators like J.D. Cash and Jesse Trinity, they're very much convinced that these letters are real. Tim was working for some Black Ops branch, and that he was assigned essentially to be a Lee Harvey Oswald infiltrating the right wing and to orchestrate some catastrophic tragedy, and then Tim takes the blame on behalf of the militia patriot movement, thereby ending any possibility of American Revolution 2.0 after the country is outraged from Ruby Ridge and Waco. And some of the things that happened in the 80s, too. A lot of people have put a lot of the pieces together of this particular puzzle. They've done some great work, but it just goes... No one remembers it, no one cares about it, because 9/11 happened and was, 20 times as large in death toll and in magnitude, and we got 2 wars out of it. So no one really cares about Oklahoma City anymore. But the fascination with Oklahoma City is how closely it hits to the patriot community. I mean, it was our people being framed for this murder, which the bottom line effect was to kill the militia patriot movement, which was growing and expanding and burgeoning. Now, Dennis Mahon, like I said, he was in and around these people. He knows the truth. I'm sure they don't want him talking about this. If any of these prosecutors since then know what he was up to at Oklahoma City. I don't even know if these district attorneys, these prosecutors, his defense attorneys, his public defenders, whoever is on his legal counsel, I don't even know. It's been such a long time. I don't even know if they know what he was up to and what he was truly involved in. I don't even know. So, I am lobbying Tom Metzger to use his influence as someone who's widely respected in white nationalism, someone who I'm sure Dennis Mahon has a lot of respect for and admiration for. And I don't know all the details of who's fallen out, what happened in the past. It might have been that Mahon and Metzger have fallen out, and that Metzger has no pull, no influence over Mahon anymore. That could be the case. I simply don't know. I'm about half to a third of these people's age. I'm simply not privy to all the things that have happened since. All I have is the documentaries and the books that were written about this particular event and information that's published on the internet. So I don't know all the drama, all the details, but I know, having been around the CI world, white nationalism, libertarianism, alternative politics on the internet, it's just chock full of drama and all sorts of shady characters. I mean, what can I say? That's what it is. And anyone who dips their toe in for 5 minutes comes away with that impression, unfortunately. So I wrote an email, and I CC'd Bob from D.C., one of Metzger's former associates. I guess they're on good terms again. And I asked that Tom Metzger use his influence to persuade Dennis Mahon to finally come out with the truth. For the sake of people trying to know what happened. Not because, and I'm sure this could be how it gets interpreted, right? That I'm some rat who wants him to spill the beans and put his comrades in danger and all this sort of shit. No. Everyone who was in and around that thing, Andy Strassmeyer fled back overseas with the help of Kirk Lyons. Brescia and the rest of the ARA, they're either dead or in prison. No charges are going to come out of this. The government isn't going to come out and say, oh, okay, you know what? You caught us. We did lie. It wasn't just McVeigh, it was all these other people. Nothing's going to happen. No one's going to touch anything about this in officialdom, but people on the internet who want to know the truth and have been following this story for 20 plus years can finally get some closure. How about all the victims' families? that have lived a nightmare ever since. The mothers and fathers who lost their babies in the daycare that was blown up and incinerated. All the people who lost spouses and parents and family members and co-workers and neighbors and friends. Don't they deserve to know what happened? Isn't it time we understand all the ins and outs of how Zog pulled this thing off? I think it is. And I think people would have a lot more respect for some of these people like Dennis Mahon. He should come out and apologize, but I'm not holding my breath for that. Terry Nichols, I think if he were ungagged and free to tell the truth, maybe he might tell a lot of the truth and give us something. Maybe, I don't know, maybe he's disreputable, maybe he's not to be believed. I don't know, but I think we should get all the cards on the table. Everyone should put their cards on the table. It's way past time. There's no need for Terry Nichols to hold his cards close to the vest anymore. And there's no need for Dennis Mahon not to tell us what really happened. He's in prison for life. He chose this route. He's not some, unless Mahon was framed for this latest bomb job that he's been accused of, I have a hard time feeling any sympathy for him. A real hard time. I admit, I don't know all the details of what happened with Mahon. Did his handler set him up, or did he really have a hand in this bombing incident in 2012 out in the Southwest? And I could be, I'm going off the top of my head of what I've read from months ago when I got in a Twitter spat with, what's his face, Covington. See, no one knows, even these people in white nationalism like Covington. Does he or his followers really know what happened with Oklahoma City? In the Elohim City crowd and the white nationalist bank robbers in and around McVeigh? No one knows this story. Because it's been covered up, and you're never going to get the truth. You're never going to get the truth from the mainstream big publications. You're never going to get it from the news media. You're never going to get it from the government. There's only a handful of people out on the internet who know what really happened and know that there's a whole nother side of the story. And that information is precious, and we need all hands on deck for people to come out and finally tell everyone what happened. Now, I think if you're brave enough to go bomb a bunch of shit and do a bunch of stupid criminal shit that doesn't help anyone, I think you should at least have the courage to come out and tell the truth about what you know about previous crimes that you've been protected from. Now, I wouldn't come out here and say these kind of things if I wasn't convinced that Mahon knows all the dirt. If I didn't think Mahon wasn't intimately involved with all these characters, I would never open my mouth and say anything about it. But I'm convinced, after all that I've read, books upon books upon books, handfuls of documentaries that are out on YouTube, originally, published and recorded and produced in the 1990s. And Dennis Mahon is on a number of these documentaries, running his mouth, betraying the secrets of quote-unquote white nationalism in the revolutionary movement. He's out there running his mouth about it, giving innuendo, has that shit-eating grin on his face like he knows something but won't tell all of it, and he thinks it's so funny, and he's so powerful, and he's just having a good old time yakking it up in front of the camera. So don't come at me like I'm trying to put this guy on blast and get him to say something he hasn't already said and taunted the public with. That's not the case. This guy has gone on documentaries with Ambrose Evans Pritchard and J.D. Cash and has alluded to the fact that he was involved and that there's more to the story and that he loved Andy the German, and Andy the German, Andy Strassmeyer, hasn't returned any of his calls after he fled the country. And Dennis Mahon's real hurt about it. He really liked Andy Strassmeyer. Now, I don't think White Nationalism 1.0, I don't think they're wrong about everything they say. I think they're pretty right. I think they're pretty right on target about a lot of things. The problem is when you cross the line and do illegal terrorist shit, you can't expect normal people to come and sign on to that. If all that's needed is a crime spree to get white people liberated in North America, well, gee, why didn't it happen after all the bank robberies and blowing up the Murrah building? Why are we still in bondage? You know, I think the Turner Diaries did more harm than good, to be honest with you. And I don't buy that Tim, Tim carried this book around with him every day of his life and preached the gospel of the Turner Diaries. That could be very well Tim McVeigh being sheep-dipped like Lee Harvey Oswald passing out communist flyers in New Orleans, right? That there's a lot to the McVeigh thing that just reminds me of Lee Harvey Oswald and someone being sheep-dipped, someone playing a part, someone playing a character to set the stage for taking the fall, taking the blame for something. But the Turner Diaries and the crime spree stuff, I mean, I read it too. Is it exciting? Is it a fast-paced novel that's very interesting? And does it have a lot of patriotic, pro-America, pro-Constitution, pro-Christian, pro-gun rights elements to it? Yes, it does. But everyone ought to know, reading it, like, this is totally unrealistic. It's more of a fluff type thing to get people excited. And there were quite a few things in the book, honestly, that were quite prophetic, that William Pierce, I think, had a great insight into even back in the 70s when he wrote it, about what was coming, where we were headed as a country. And, there's some people who, everyone talks about Glenn Miller being a government informant and a rat. Well, what about William Pierce after he took all the money from Bob Matthews and the Order? You think the feds didn't know that William Pierce got money in a duffel bag, hundreds of thousands of dollars? How come Pierce never got prosecuted? Do you really think they didn't know he got money after people like Glenn Miller went and snitched and told everyone what happened? So understand that I want Tom Metzger to make an appeal to Dennis Mahon, and Tom's got followers and people who love him all across the country. Tom is like, well, if I had to compare him, he's like Ho Chi Minh. He's got street cred as a nationalist and as someone who wants independence for white people. And I think he should use that for good in this case by just having Mahon just tell all the truth. He's already snitched. He dry snitched on these videos. So you can't accuse me of trying to get him to spill all the beans and betray all these people. He already did it. 20 plus years ago. He just didn't go all the way, and the people who were doing the investigating were so fresh to it and didn't know just to keep pressing him and to get it all on paper and all on video. Ambrose Evans Pritchard. J.D. Cash from the McCurtain Gazette. Mahon knows all the secrets. And Mahon, here's the other thing. If a couple stories are correct that other people relate, like David Paul Hammer, who was on death row with Tim McVeigh, he claims that there is a version of the story of the bombing that day, that one of the versions of the story is that Dennis Mahon was sitting in the parking lot of a place down the street from the Murrah building called St. Anthony's Annex, and that this particular parking lot had a perfect view to witness and spectate the bombing of the Murrah building. And one version of the story is that Mahon is down there in the parking lot about to watch the bombing with, of all people, according to this story, Tim McVeigh's handler, who David Paul Hammer refers to as the Major. And Tim McVeigh never gave up the name of the Major. He would never tell Hammer the real name of this guy. He took it to the grave with him. Now, Dennis Mahon supposedly witnessed the bombing with this man. Who is he? Why is it wrong for me to ask Dennis Mahon to come out and tell us who McVeigh's handler was? Who is the Major referred to in Deadly Secrets? And folks, Deadly Secrets, get on YouTube. I read the entire book. I narrated the entire book and put it on YouTube. Because I wanted to know the truth. Cared enough to know the truth and share it with other people and hopefully bump into other people who would give me more tidbits and pieces, more trails to follow. That I took the time to record it and put it out there because I think it's that important. And I think that just like with JFK or 9/11, if we can suss out and get all the details, all the pieces to the puzzle, and click every little jigsaw piece together and complete the puzzle to one of these, we can use it as a framework to more or less dissect all these others that we don't have all the pieces to. In other words, if we solve one of these, we can have a cookie-cutter recipe, picture, formula to know how they pull off all these other things. And I think we should know who Tim McVeigh's handler was in Black Ops. This person he referred to as the Major, some military figure. Maybe he wasn't even military. Maybe he was... what if he was the Mossad? Posing as CIA, posing as military. Well, what about that? See, there's all sorts of twists and turns to take into account with this, and we need every piece possible. So quite possibly, Dennis Mahon knows who Timothy McVeigh's handler was. He maybe watched the bombing that day, that morning at 9:02, 9:03 a.m. of the Murrah building with Tim McVeigh's handler in downtown Oklahoma City. How's that for a story? White nationalist terrorist is on the scene of the Alfred P. Murrah building explosion, bombing, truck bombing, with Black Ops commander. Now, Terry Nichols came out in a sworn declaration in, 2006, 2007, and said that Timothy McVeigh's handler was Larry Potts, or Larry Potts Sr., I think, from the FBI, who was formerly number 2, the deputy director of the FBI during Waco for sure. Maybe Ruby Ridge, too. Maybe he was there. But the number 2 under Louis Freeh, Larry Potts, was Tim McVeigh's handler. That's what Nichols claims. Now, is Nichols believable? He is a convicted mass murderer. Should we believe him? I don't know. But I want to know what he has to say. I think, like I said, we should get all the cards on the table. And I started thinking about it and looking around and saying, well, who could still, to this day, possibly shed light on this story? Who could possibly have sway and influence over someone involved in this story? And I got to thinking, Dennis Mahon and Tom Metzger. Duh. Hello. Metzger. Who does Dennis Mahon respect? Tom Metzger. But then again, I don't know all the drama and all the backstory that's happened over the past 25 years or so. As you know, everyone in white nationalism or CI or one of these, fringe right-wing things, they all hate each other worse than they hate the Jews. Sort of like the Arabs in the Middle East. They all attack each other and hate each other worse than they hate Israel. Well, it's the same thing that I found with white nationalism. All I want is to know what really happened with Oklahoma City and for all the cards to come out. I think it's way past time. The government does not want this to come out. And you want to talk about hurting Zog? You want to talk about delivering a blow that they just can't cope with? How about the truth? How's that for a blow? How's that for a volatile, explosive payload? The truth hurts. The pen is mightier than the sword, someone once said. Why not tell the truth about what really happened at Oklahoma City? Why not use that as a weapon to further delegitimize the government and show them to be the monsters that they truly are? Why not? Because a few people like Dennis Mahon or people in white nationalism want to save their reputations and not be shown to be fools and idiots and useful idiots that they were used as in April of 95? Is that why? Well, your reputations are already shot. Believe it or not. So what does it hurt to come out and tell the truth? What does it hurt? Dennis Mahon is going to die in prison. And the mainstream, when they write an article about him, they call him a lunatic. No one's going to believe him anyway. The mainstream isn't going to believe him. So what's the problem? Why can't a few of us on the internet who really want to know, why can't we know? Why is that? Now, I tried to say what I've said here in a 5-minute draft to Tom Metzger. And I tried to stay respectful. And I tried to stay persuasive. And I tried to stay on point with what I wanted. And my request was simple. Tom to use his sway to get Dennis Mahon to spill the beans. For all the reasons I've already mentioned. Because I believe we deserve to know the truth. And there's not going to be any blowback. There's not going to be any big problems. No one's going to get charges filed on them. They're not going to come out and say, hold up, we lied about Oklahoma City and do a big turnaround. They're not going to do that. So I ask you, what is the harm in a few of us knowing the truth and knowing the full story? What is the harm in Dennis Mahon spilling the beans and telling us all what he knows? But I'm afraid that, like Tim McVeigh in prison with David Paul Hammer, he wants to secure his legacy as the terrorist who started American Revolution 2.0. That's what Tim said. He said, hold off, I'll tell you the truth. If you help me out here in prison, I'll tell you the truth, but you have to wait till I'm dead, and that the book American Terrorist is published, and I go down as the soldier who never flinched, who never blinked, and made the score 168-1, and I won this battle. And he told David Paul Hammer, one day, the truth's going to come out, and people are going to realize that the government did this. But until then, I need to secure my place in history as the perfect soldier who carried out his mission and didn't flinch and got retribution on the government for Waco and Ruby Ridge. And I'm afraid Mahon maybe wants to outdo Tim McVeigh. And that, folks, for him to tell us the truth, it's going to look poorly on him. It's going to make him look like a useful idiot. So that's a very good reason why we may not ever know the truth, because it's going to reflect poorly on a lot of people who were used by a higher power to carry out the dirty work of the bad guys and then push the blame onto the Patriot movement. So this is my message to Tom Metzger and anyone else out there who has influence on Dennis Mahon. Why not? Why not come out and tell the truth, make amends? Don't people deserve to know the truth? It's been all this time. Anyway, that's how I feel about it, and that concludes my message to Tom Metzger. Thank you for listening.